To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell. This is a poem about sex, not about love or the other kinds of themes you might expect to find in a poem written hundreds of years ago. This is a dirty poem written by someone in lust with another person and trying to think any way he can to persuade her to have sex with him. In that way, this poem is timeless because probably right now some of you are thinking about people you're deeply in lust with and how you can convince them to go out with you. In this short film, I'm going to explain what the poem's about, or to put it another way, I'm going to explain to you the reasons the poet gives to persuade the young woman to sleep with him. We don't know who she was, or if it worked or not, but I like to think that it did, because once you start to crack the code of the poem, you can see how brilliant and unusual it is. I hope you got something for all that effort of writing it, other than you having to study his poem hundreds of years later. I'm also going to explain to you briefly who Andrew Marvell was, what he believed in and wrote about apart from sex, and when he lived. He's part of a group of poets called the metaphysical poets, so I'm also going to try to explain what metaphysics is. I'll also talk about some of the themes and languages used in the poem and then rewrite it as a tweet. To start off with, let's think about why he wrote it. Marvell is in lust and desperately wants the object of his dreams to sleep with him, and she's not giving in easily. She is the coy mistress of the title, coy meaning shy or reluctant. He decides to write the poem to convince her that she's wrong to put so much faith in her precious virginity and just give in to him. Or as that slimeball Robin Thicke might have crooned, she knows she wants it, really. It being sex, with him, preferably right now. The poem can be broken down into 3 sections, and there are a number of recurring themes. The main theme is about something you can all probably identify with: hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, the instant thrills that sex can offer. Marvell encourages her to seize the moment and squeeze as much pleasure as possible out of life before she loses her looks or dies. Youth and beauty don't last forever, he tells her, so why wait? Enjoy yourself. The second theme is a metaphor to do with imagining living life in a single day. He reminds her that while time stretches on for all eternity, the lifespan of a human being is over incredibly quickly. If you imagine we're born in the morning and your teenage years are around lunchtime, all too quickly you hit the responsibilities of adulthood and middle age in the afternoon and evening. When the sun sets, you've already grown old, while nighttime represents death, the eternal sleep. It's an interesting idea. In your own life in a day, what time is it now? About 11 o'clock in the morning? With each passing second, you're growing up, getting closer to the day of reckoning when you get your exam results, start having to face up to your future, make big decisions about your life. So, you can learn something from this poem. So let's start. Who was Andrew Marvell? He was the son of a clergyman who lived in a time of huge political and social upheaval in the 17th century when Charles I was beheaded, the monarchy was defeated, and Oliver Cromwell and the Puritans took control of the country. Marvell lived in Hull in Yorkshire, which is why he references the Humber River in his poem, and he was even the Member of Parliament for Hull during the brief period before the monarchy was restored to power. As a politician, Marvell was very outspoken, and much of his work was critical of the monarchy, so many of his poems had to be published after his death. So what was metaphysics? Metaphysics is a form of philosophy which tries to tackle the big questions in life, like, why are we here? Marvell was one of the leading metaphysical poets. They tended to look at the important issues in life like religion, love and morality from an unusual angle, using abstract metaphors to explore their ideas. They're often witty and use a rhythm which is almost like speech. For example, another metaphysical poet called John Donne tries to convince a woman to have sex with him by using the metaphor of a flea that has bitten both of them. The flea, he tells her, has drunk both their blood, so their DNA is already mixed in some way inside the flea, so we may as well have sex. Poets have always been obsessed with sex, like pop stars. The poem takes the form of a dramatic monologue, the poet's talking directly to the object of his desires. He uses iambic tetrameter, not iambic pentameter like Shakespeare and many other poets, because it's more speech-like to capture this idea that he's directly talking to her. It also makes the structure of each line shorter, which reinforces the theme that time passes so quickly. He also uses rhyming couplets, which has the added bonus of making his poems sound more witty and clever, which is one of his main seduction techniques. The first part of the poem almost mocks the poetic cliché of spending loads of time praising a lover's beauty, using hyperbolic images to offer praise so excessive that it seems almost fake. Had we but world enough and time is his way of reminding her that time is precious, and that the idea of spending a lifetime being virtuous and modest is a nice idea in theory, but actually a waste of time. He uses the word crime to finish this opening couplet to make his feelings very clear to her on the subject of her not going to bed with him. He also uses binary opposition to mock the clichés in romantic poetry of using exotic locations such as the image of her sitting by the river Ganges in India while he is sitting by the banks of the Humber in Hull where he lives. Don't live in this fake romantic world of love poetry, he's urging her. Come and live in the real world with me. The idea of spending 200 years praising each of her breasts is clearly meant to be ridiculous, and the way he finishes by saying he could spend 30,000 years praising the rest of her is obviously impossible and meant to be ridiculous. Note that her breasts are also twice as worthy of his praise than her eyes. I told you this was a rude poem. This, if only section, is gently mocking, using biblical references to show the length of human existence, starting with the flood in the Old Testament. Remember, God flooded the world because man was sinful, until the end of time, or Armageddon, which is what Marvell means when he writes of the conversion of the Jews. It also uses loads of modal verbs like would and should to show that what she wants is idealistic, not real. I also love the image of his vegetable love, which could have many meanings, but I like to think of as referring to the fact that many vegetables, like carrots, parsnips or courgettes, look rude. Of course, it also suggests that his love has been hidden, as many vegetables grow underground, or just that it's slowly grown into what it's become, a lust for her so strong that he has the right to convince her that she needs to sleep with him. The second section begins with the word but. Back to reality, back to the real world. Time is personified as having a winged chariot pursuing them. Time is their enemy. It changes to the present tense, becomes more urgent as he steps up his seduction. The images become obsessed with the passing of time and death and desolation. The line, deserts of vast eternity, suggests that all of us are mere grains of sand, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, and therefore implying that she's being too precious about her honour if that is her reason for not sleeping with him. Deserts also suggest the grains of sand in an hourglass, which was an old-fashioned way of recording the passing of time, again telling her that life is passing her by. He uses a morbid image that when she's dead and lying in a marble vault, her beauty will be long gone. Brilliantly, he uses the image of worms taking her long-preserved virginity as she lies in her tomb, which is a gross image, but also meant to be witty. In the same way he describes her quaint honour. Both of these words were euphemisms for the female sex organs, like clunge if you like. He's being rude, and he knows it, and she does too. He's honest with her, and talks openly of his lust rather than using the word love, which you and she might have expected. Quaint also means old-fashioned, so he's gently mocking her here for being too precious about herself and for denying herself pleasure. And him, of course. This second section ends with another great couplet which sums up his attitude to sex. When you're dead, so take what pleasure you can while you're still alive to enjoy it. The final section starts with the word now. He reverts to the theme of living life in a single day, referring to a youthful beauty in terms of it being morning. The youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, which he contrasts to the instant fires of his lust. The images he uses in this final section are quite violent, referring to amorous birds of prey, and using masculine, aggressive words like power, rough strife, and devour, which he contrasts with more feminine words and images like sweetness. The image of rolling themselves up into a ball obviously sums up images of a couple having sex together, combining the male and the female as one, but also suggests a kind of cannonball, an unstoppable force that can, quote, tear our pleasure through the iron gates of life. To me, what he's telling her is that they must seize the moment while they can. Life is short and life is hard, and you have to be bold if you're to find any sort of happiness. It ends with a lovely image saying that although they can't stop the inevitable passing of time or make the sun stand still, while they're making love, they can cheat time and become the authors of their own destiny. It's a poem about giving in to your animal passions and taking control of your own lives, rather than being enslaved by social conventions about being virtuous and modest and limiting your desires. Carpe diem, seize the moment. What's not to like?